Good evening and welcome to this week's edition of Behind Headlines, and in this programme tonight we will be discussing the biggest intelligence leak of classified US military documents for over a decade. We'll be asking, what does this mean in terms of America's security and America's relationship with our allies? The danger is that we'll see that American enemies of America, such as China, Russia, Iran, will be empowered by this huge intelligence leak, and also this causes a diplomatic fallout between America's allies, such as Britain, Israel, and South Korea. And we'll be asking, what does this huge intelligence leak mean for not only the security of the United States, but also for the security of the Western world? Regan, it's great to be doing another Behind Headlines with you, and particularly talking about the biggest US intelligence leak in over a decade. I have to stress that, having tried to research this program, that it is complex, it is multifaceted. It's very hard to actually underline, was this deliberate? Is there a hidden agenda regarding this? And what are the consequences for US security and the security of the West to know all of this classified information that has now been pushed out into the public domain, and that we can all find out about it?
Well, when the story first broke, Simon, it was one of those things that you look at the headlines and you read a couple of the initial articles and you think, oh, okay, this is not good news, this is really bad, but it seems fairly straightforward. It seems like it might be, you know, just a cut and dry. This is someone maybe along the lines of Edward Snowden, who has some element in their conscience where they think they're doing the world a service by putting out these documents. But it's not that. It's extremely complicated and complex because it's an individual who, it seems that he's just shared this to a video gaming server where he's a part of a kind of strange community of individuals, you know, just posting chats and stuff about their video games and communicating through their gaming, trying to one-up the people who he's having communication with. So it's all about one-upping. It's all about, oh, look at this information I got. Maybe there's a little bit of prodding, people saying he didn't know what he was talking about or whatever in some cases. And he says, no, you know, look, this is my job. And he proves that he actually has access to highly classified documents at a really young age. I mean, what a privilege it is, Simon, to, at his age, have access to such highly classified documents, but then to disgrace that privilege. I mean, this is the last time we witnessed the scale of the classified documents being leaked like this was when, it's hard to believe it's that long ago now, in 2010, Julian Assange, alongside Bradley Manning, published a series of US intelligence leaks, and I mean that was absolutely chaotic. And while I believe Bradley Manning has since been pardoned, but there's this ongoing fiasco in relation to Julian Assange, only recently extradited. The United States is now facing, even since that time, its absolute worst intelligence leak since Edward Snowden in 2013. Assange was the beginning of it with his WikiLeaks. Snowden then had this element where I think he did believe, rightly or wrongly, naively or intelligently, that he was doing the world a service by exposing some of the surveillance operations outside of Washington. This is the worst link since that. That was in 2013. More than 100 classified documents relating to Russia, Ukraine, China, and the Middle East are now believed to be in the public domain after they were posted in this obscure online forum last month.
No, and of course also that this time a US intelligence leak has been blamed on Jack Teixeira, a 21-year-old who is a National Guardsman at the Otis Air National Guard Base in Massachusetts. And he was charged last week in Boston with 2 accounts under the US Espionage Act and faces the prospect of a 15-year prison sentence. The highly classified military documents surfaced on the online gaming forum. They revealed how the US are conducting its war in the Ukraine against Russia. And according to Sky News, this massive security breach shows the vulnerabilities in Ukraine's defences, as well as the fact that British special forces are operating in the Ukraine. The Times of Israel revealed that the US government believes that Israel can be pressured to provide the Ukraine with lethal military aid through third parties that threaten Israel's security in the Middle East, and ask, what do these US intelligence leaks mean for our national security, and what does it reveal about the direction that the Biden administration is taking in terms of US foreign policy and security policy? But we have to ask, what do these documents reveal? Well, according to the US political news website The Hill, that reports on Congress, and under an article entitled Key Takeaways from Major US Intelligence Leak. Firstly, they say that US classified military documents have been leaked, reveal vital information ranging from the US assessment of the Russian-Ukraine war to intelligence on how the Biden administration is spying on their adversaries and their allies alike. And a number of these documents are daily security briefings from the US Military Joint of Staff, and give details on US and NATO aid to the Ukraine that include information on the progress of weapons aid. And according to the New York Times, who first broke the story, the documents indicate that the US has been spying on Russia, but also on Ukraine's leaders to monitor the progress of the war. I mean, the thing is, these are classified information, but they don't reveal things that you can't actually put together yourself.
Yeah, so it's not a total revelation, is it? I mean, a lot of the stuff in these documents have been in other ways than through these leaks in the public domain, or decipherable with ease, maybe without any legitimate confirmation or evidence that could be like proven in a court of law or something. But I think most of the stuff that's there, we've even talked about to a degree on this program. You can think about the US wanting Israel to get involved. We've talked before about how Israel was trying to play a mediating role between Ukraine and Russia. Of course, having many Ukrainians and Russians who are also Israeli citizens, but also the complexity with Russia being heavily involved in Syria, just very, very close by, and how that could also add extra threat and concern to Israel's security should they start openly supplying weapons and technology to Ukraine. China and its interest in Russia, that was evident from the very beginning. Things like that, they're not exactly earth-shaking revelations, are they?
No, that's true.
But the principle of the matter is we have a young man who very foolishly, and I do believe that this was out of just absolute legitimate foolishness. It does not seem that he has had any gain out of this. It's not like he's been selling the information to others. He's just being stupid. We'll say what it is, trying to one-up friends on an online gaming platform.
Look,
it's bizarre.
Let's just take a step back and say we're living in the 21st century, right? We know that, for example, there are companies that provide cybersecurity, that provide security in place for multinational companies, for governments alike. So how is it that a low-ranking US airman who works on intelligence and he works on the kind of IT sector not only has access to this material for his job, which surely if you're actually just sending information on or passing information on to various departments, then he shouldn't have access to actually look at these documents. But then how do you actually, then how is he able then to download those documents and take them off the server, knowing that this is a huge security breach? Not only is it a huge security breach, but it actually threatens the United States as a world superpower. It empowers the enemies of the United States, such as Russia, China, Iran, with classified information on US assessments on certain regions of the world that are in their interests, but also damages diplomatic relations with America's allies, such as Israel, such as our nation, such as South Korea and other European nations. That means that we can't trust the Americans. We can't trust this American administration. We can't trust the American government. We can't trust American intelligence and security services to have information that is essential for keeping people alive. And I'm talking about, operatives that are on the ground, in the field, who are gathering this information that is designed to protect us all from dangerous threats and threats of terrorism being put in the public domain so that America's allies know all about them. You would have thought that there would be proper procedures in place where that is not possible. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the. I'm not a technocrat, so I wouldn't know how this actually works or the technicalities of how you download these classified documents, even if you had access to them. Surely that would need some higher authorization to actually get these documents.
Yeah, I do feel that maybe there's a bit more to this story than we're being told. I think there's right. An element to which there's a role that Teixeira may have that we have not been let in on. Maybe there have been even more severe leaks that were maybe being planned. Maybe some of this, I don't want to get all conspiratorial in this way, but maybe things go beyond the bizarre gaming platform story. Maybe there is more and more dangerous stuff, something more insidious. I mean, he's being charged with espionage, right? He's not being charged with just being an idiot who just took some snaps and thinks, okay, I'm going to show off to my friends, online. There's something that is pretty serious behind all this. Will it come out in the trial? I think we just have to wait and see.
But he didn't, look, two things he didn't do. Jack Teixeira, he didn't actually give this to any of America's enemies.
That's true.
He didn't hand it to the Russians. He didn't give this to the Chinese. He didn't give this to the Iranians. He didn't leak this in the media either. So it was only 5 months later that the New York Times picked this up as an exclusive. Now, this has been in the public area, obviously on niche gaming online forums, but it was out there, it was out in the public domain, and it's taken 5 months for the American administration to act. And did they act only because the New York Times decided to pick it up and run with the story?
Well, one wonders about the timing of it. One wonders if they just held it for a little while and thought, okay, well, we know this, we see this, we're just going to monitor it and make sure, is this really damaging? And then let's respond, let's wait. But then, of course, you're quite right that the New York Times got to it first, right, before they revealed anything.
And why was this all so public? I mean, that's the other thing. This was in the full glaze of the world's media.
Right.
And you would have thought this really important, sensitive, classified information and something like this being leaked would be stopped automatically. As soon as it was put on a platform, people then realised that this is in danger. This endangers the United States. This endangers and empowers America's enemies. This also then damages diplomatic relations with America's allies. Let's nip this in the bud now in order that this doesn't get into the hands of our enemies and the world's media doesn't pick it up. So I think there are huge question marks over not only the way that the US administration has handled this, but why had they waited 5 months before they reacted, and why was it took a story, an exclusive in the New York Times, for them to finally act?
Well, here's some of the background to the guy who leaked it. Jack Teixeira, 21. He was an airman with the Massachusetts Air National Guard's 102nd Intelligence Wing, according to the Washington Post. So depending on his role, as it is an intelligence wing, that might go towards explaining how he had access to some classified documents at least. Teixeira was allegedly upset about the war in Ukraine, and it remains unclear if he meant to influence American perceptions more broadly on the conflict. If he wanted to influence American perceptions more broadly on the conflict, he went about it in a strange way, because for months he was allegedly providing pictures of the documents to a select online community on chat forum site Discord. So it appears that he's not trying to have any massive influence, just more influence over the people he's in touch with on this community. Discord is mostly used by gamers and other streamers online, but they were never meant, essentially these documents were never meant to be out in any wider public sphere, according to the Washington Post. But as things happen, these documents were floating around, and it seems like maybe these gamers in this community didn't fully realize the gravity of what they were sitting on, didn't fully appreciate.
I think that's probably true. I mean, come on, what 20-year-old or what 19, 20, 21-year-old would know the full extent of these kind of documents that they would have in their possession?
You would hope,
its implications.
But increasingly now, you're right.
But also you have to question a little bit of Jack Teixeira's judgment. He's in a very privileged position of being in charge of US state secrets. And these are things you do not leak online, even if it means you want to show off to your mates that you know more.
There.
You know, but surely there are checks and balances put in place. Well, there will be now, hopefully, after this, to ensure that there isn't such leaking of information.
Well, I think the check and balance is the consequence if you're caught out to some degree. I think that's what it's meant to be. But think about it this way, okay? He has to fulfill his role in intelligence, if it's in intelligence some way. He has access to classified documents. He would be able to access those on the server for that particular wing. He would probably be able to log into that server remotely as well, but let's suppose he just was able, he was logging into it on site. You know, he can easily print screen, copy it into a document, or he can maybe just use his own mobile phone and just, you know, take a shot. And it's strange that there's no thought. It doesn't appear that there was any real, okay, what am I actually doing here? Could this cost me years of my life? Could I actually be charged with grave offenses, including espionage? There doesn't seem to be any thought. If everything is as it is on the surface, and sometimes the truth is stranger than fiction here. You know.
Sometimes, but he would have been briefed in that job, though. He would have been briefed on his responsibilities. He would have been told what his responsibilities are. And the one thing in the military I think you're ingrained and indoctrinated with is that if you have important information, you keep it to yourself, because if you leak it, then our enemies are much stronger and can attack us with it. Let's just break down what some of these leaking of the biggest US intelligence failure in over a decade when it comes to leaking classified documents actually tell us. So on the Ukraine war is where the predominant majority of the documents are about. So it puts the Pentagon papers circulated online for millions to see, are emboldening critics across Western nations who support less involvement in the war. Also see that on February, the documents reviewed by The Hill online details US conclusion that the war is headed for stalemate way beyond 2023, and both sides are unlikely to make headway anytime soon. The Pentagon's intelligence predicts that Russia will continue to pound Ukrainian lines in eastern regions, slowly overwhelming Ukrainian defences with a daily deluge of artillery fires, airstrikes, and repeated multi-pronged small unit ground attack assaults.
Now, these tactics have diminished Russian forces and munition stockpiles to a level that, barring an unforeseen recovery, can exhaust Russian units and frustrate Moscow's war aims, resulting in a protracted war beyond 2023. The assessment says. In one way, not a massive revelation. It seems that they are content in persisting for years if it takes that long to reach any outcome. The stunning conclusion, though, is contrary to the public U.S. stance. that Ukraine will be successful in its coming spring counteroffensive. The Pentagon is still reviewing the leaks, including whether any of the documents may have been altered. And I think we can put that down a lot. We have to recognize in any war, on any side, propaganda is another facet of war.
Absolutely.
And so saying and being confident about success in a public way does not always mean that there's that same confidence privately.
Especially when you consider what's at stake.
Yeah.
And I think it's a little bit harder, particularly maybe from an American audience watching this program, to realize how dangerous the situation in Russia and the Ukraine is for the security of Europe. I mean, Americans, you've got the big Atlantic Ocean that separates Europe from the United States. But when it comes to British security, when it comes to European security, the fact that Russia has invaded the Ukraine poses a direct security threat to European national security. And what the danger is that if there isn't a strong NATO response to that attack, then the whole of NATO can collapse. And before we know it, we have a domino effect whereby nations in Eastern Europe, such as the Baltic states, such as Eastern European nations, collapse and Russia takes them over. And before you know it, then you have the breakup of NATO and then followed by the danger of the West. So there is so much at stake with this war. Obviously, there are globalist agendas involved in it, and I completely understand that, with the desire to bring about regime change in Russia. No doubt that is probably the heart of the Biden administration's foreign policy towards Russia and the Ukraine war. But the other danger, I think, with this one as well is the fact that these documents reveal the deployment of special forces in the Ukraine. Now, when you look at how effective the Ukrainian forces have been in pushing back the Russian advance, it kind of makes sense that there are special forces in operation. But the question is, do they have a legal right to be there? Has this got the support of both houses of Congress, the Senate and the Congress, for effectively American involvement and putting troops on the ground in the Ukraine?
Well,
that's the big question.
And this is what many people are debating and discussing at the moment. The Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, a Republican out of Georgia, as a fierce critic of continued U.S. support for Ukraine, has tweeted that the Biden administration and the Pentagon have been caught lying about the war. While yes, leaking classified documents is serious, many are calling Teixeira a hero for pulling back the flimsy, transparent curtain and revealing what we suspected all along, Greene wrote, referencing the 21-year-old Air National Guard service member who's accused of leaking the documents. Others have criticized, looking particularly at the revelation of that U.S. involvement you just spoke of in Ukraine, with officials sharing detailed intelligence with Kiev. Fox host Tucker Carlson said the documents spilled secrets on an illegal war undeclared by Congress, falsely claiming that American troops were directly fighting Russian soldiers. He said, "It's our war. The United States is a direct combatant in a war against Russia. This is a hot war between the two primary nuclear superpowers on Earth, and yet this war has never formally been declared." He also said the U.S. was treating the alleged leaker like Osama bin Laden for telling the truth about Ukraine's struggles in the war. Now, here's the thing. There are many conflicts that the U.S. has been engaged in, that they've had military personnel directly engaged in, where they have not declared war. This is not new. This is not just in relation to Ukraine and Russia. This is ongoing in other parts of the world as well. And I do think that some of this is a more Russian-steered, buying into the propaganda of the Russian propaganda machine element that is unfortunately very strong in the United States. It's kind of strong here to some degree, but this is a problem with a lot of particularly conservative commentators are buying in more so to the idea, which you referenced a few minutes ago, that, okay, there's some agendas that are going on, which there are, but that they're not seeing actually this goes beyond ideology. This is also about national sovereignty. Just because you don't like the way you perceive Ukraine headed does not make it right for Russia to invade against.
But it's also a political issue as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, for example, the Democrats and Biden are fully supporting Ukraine in their war to push back the Russian advance and the Russian invasion of the Ukraine. Therefore, the Republicans have to be on the opposite side of the fence and say we oppose it. But of course, what we're asking for in all of this, and so many people are, is the kind of transparency that goes with it. And of course, this is what these documents reveal, is they reveal the truth. So the hidden things that have been in darkness are now kind of exposed in the light, according to Scripture. And that's exactly the situation that we find ourselves in today. The only difference is that with this information coming to the light, is that the enemies of the United States are fully aware of it and can use it against the United States. The damage that this does to America's international reputation, but also the breakdown of trust between governments such as Israel, the allies of the United States, as well as our nation, Britain, and South Korea and other European nations, also then questioning America's actions and America's trustworthiness, I think, is effectively what's at stake here.
Yeah, and one of the things that the documents highlights as well is, in addition to showing some of the discrepancy in regard to the public fronting and reporting on the war, it highlights and paints Russia actually in a way that is not good for them. Branislav Slanchev, professor of political science at the University of California, San Diego, who studies the conduct of war, said that for the Russians, quote, all of this is bad news, end quote. Slanchev said Moscow is unsure whether the documents are accurate or not, keeping them guessing, while there are also no battle plans or detailed operational assessments for the coming Ukrainian counteroffensive in the links. I actually think this is going to be beneficial to the Ukrainians, Slanchev told The Hill. They are in a very advantageous position, sitting in the center of a circle, and they can strike in many directions. And the Russians cannot guess which way, and so it's a big problem. I don't see anything in these documents that even remotely indicates or reveals what the Ukrainians are going to do. And Simon, this kind of puts in my mind the potential that some of this is maybe deliberate. Maybe there's some deliberate planting going on here. Maybe some of this is an elaborate ruse to some degree to force a hand to maybe cause some of these enemies to respond in a particular way. It's all very interesting, and I'm sure the truth will be known more and more as we go along.
Absolutely. So let's just quickly run down some more information regarding this. So the records indicate that Ukraine is inflicting a much higher toll on the Russian army, and that it is in turn taking on the battlefield, which is consistent with the Pentagon's public assessment. They reckon that somewhere between 189,000 to 223,000 Russian soldiers have been killed or wounded in the war, compared to Ukraine's 124,000 or to 131,000, according to the leaked documents, which the US gave with low confidence. Russian forces have also lost more than 3,000 tanks and upward of 10,000 armoured personnel carriers, compared to 1,700 of the Ukrainian tanks and 5,700 APCs, the documents say. Documents also reveal just how much more aircraft are deployed by Russia compared to the Ukraine, with Moscow maintaining 696 fighter jets and bombers compared to 145 warplanes for Kyiv. The Ukrainian Prime Minister has made public pleas to the US for F-16 fighter jets, as the document leaks were the hottest story in Washington, and we now have this excellent CBN News report to go to on the leaking of these classified US military documents.
This leak includes dozens of secret briefing slides for top officials, along with other highly classified information. In addition to revealing intelligence on our adversaries, there was also intel on our allies. Among the most potentially damaging deals with the war in Ukraine, secrets the Biden administration wanted to keep.
It is not intended for public consumption, and it should not be out there. What we're going to try to do is do the best we can to figure out how this happened.
National Security Council spokesman John Kirby admits the White House doesn't know how many more documents are out there. For now, the Justice Department has launched a criminal investigation, and the rest of the administration is on damage control.
I will tell you that we take this very seriously, and we will continue to investigate and turn over every rock until we find the source of this and the extent of it.
We have engaged with allies and partners at high levels over the past days, including to reassure them about our own commitment to safeguarding intelligence and, of course, our commitment to our security partnerships.
The Pentagon expressed concern that some of the leaked intel appears to have been altered, and administration officials have been slow to confirm the validity of the documents.
As these documents circulate online, I would like to highlight that they present a very serious risk to national security and have the potential to spread disinformation.
There's some speculation that Russia is behind the leak. The Kremlin, however, has not taken responsibility, commenting only that it's common to blame Russia for everything.
Russia now has a greater insight into how we collect intelligence against them. And that's, to me, the more concerning thing here.
We're going to get to the bottom of this, and then if there's actions that need to be taken as we learn more about the extent of what happened here, we'll obviously take those.
These leaks represent the most damaging breach of U.S. intelligence in a decade, and lawmakers on both sides of the aisle are among those demanding answers from the Biden administration. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer requesting Congress be briefed as the investigation continues to unfold. Caitlin Burke, CBN News, Washington.
We now want to welcome Gary Lane, who is a friend of Behind the Headlines. He's the senior international correspondent for CBN News, to the program. A warm welcome, Gary, to Behind the Headlines. Thank you for joining us. What are your thoughts on the biggest leaking of classified documents U.S. military intelligence has seen for over a decade?
Well, I think the greatest thing of note is that we've got a problem. There's an overclassification of documents. Top secret documents and classified documents are leaking everywhere. It's not just this 21-year-old Air National Guardsman out of Massachusetts. We've got former presidents who are taking classified documents, former vice presidents, and spreading them just about everywhere. It's like, are you crazy? I mean, this is absurd what's going on. There is no security, and this young man is just the latest in many of the issues that we're facing when it comes to top secret and classified information.
And Gary, really appreciate you being with us on Behind Headlines today. Can you just share how the Biden administration has reacted to these deeply embarrassing and also dangerous leaking of classified US military documents, not only regarding America's allies around the world like Britain and Israel, but also this empowers America's enemies, such as the Russians, the Iranians, the Chinese? How would they use this information intelligence against the West?
Well, President Biden said basically it was of no consequence. He didn't see that it was a problem. But this is just another example how the administration has disregard for America's allies around the world. Even though he was in Ireland and enjoying his visit there, think back of Afghanistan and the way he withdrew from Afghanistan without concern or consultation with allies. He left many allies there and basically, sorry, you're on your own. I mean, that's not a good approach. This is very damaging, this information that's out. Now, I will say this, there isn't much that the administration could do about it, but it's been out there for 5 months. So why did it take so long to shut this information down on social media and to arrest this 21-year-old man from Massachusetts? We have to ask that. But it is terribly embarrassing and possibly even dangerous. I mean, look, a lot of this information has already been public. You're not telling the Russians anything about Ukraine that they didn't already know. They knew American special forces were there, I assume, because they have many Ukrainian, pro-Russian Ukrainian agents in Ukraine. They also knew that there were British special forces there. Maybe the general public didn't know about the British special forces, but the information was public several months ago. that American special forces were there. A lot of this information we've already known, at least about Russia and Ukraine. Also, you're not fooling the Russians when you say, look, the Ukrainians are having a little problem with air defense. Everybody knows the Ukrainians are having difficulties with air defense. Why do you think they wanted to put some NATO jets in the sky there? But I think the more serious aspect of this has to do with China and what the information revealed about China.
Now, this intelligence scandal shows us a lot of how Biden and his administration deal with foreign and security policy, especially in relation to what's going on in Ukraine. What are some of the key insights we get out of this?
Well, I think one that I think disturbed a lot of people here is the fact that there were 4 Chinese spy balloons, not just one, that the Biden administration allowed to cross the continental United States and spy and gain information on some of our most sensitive military bases here, made it all the way across from Alaska all the way to South Carolina, and they didn't shoot it down until after it was offshore. Why did they allow this? But in addition to that, what we've learned from these leaks is that there were 4 Chinese spy balloons, and one of them flew over an American carrier group in the South Pacific. I guess one actually crashed in the South China Sea, but one was over our Navy ships in the South Pacific. This is very damaging. It shows that we have an administration that is very inept, that has no understanding of foreign policy and military affairs, and the globalization that China is behind right now. And this proves very embarrassing to us and to our allies.
And Gary, please share with us who Jack Teixeira is, the 21-year-old US airman that's been arrested on charges related to espionage, and why he decided to leak these classified US military documents and post them on a kind of gaming platform.
Well, you know, there's always this, oh yeah, well, I'll show you something. I mean, you have a whole generation of people that are trying to one-up one another. And this started out 5 months ago, and he started posting just short little paragraphs and sentences on a number of platforms. One was called Wow Mao. I think another one was called Discord. And then I think there was also a private chat room on YouTube. But he started posting this 5 months ago, little bits here and there. And you know, it gets a life of its own. You begin with a little sentence here, a little bit of information there. Well, sure, I'll show you. Look what I know. Look who I am. I've got this information. Yeah, you know what the U.S. is doing? Or you know what I know about Ukraine? How about what I know about China? And before you know it, complete documents. I guess there were over 100 classified and top secret documents, information revealed on social media. But this young man, what was his motivation? I think it was just trying to prove himself as somebody who knew something and was somebody. But just yesterday, it was announced that there was another woman, a Navy NCO out of the state of Washington. Her name is Sarah Bills, 37 years old. She's been known to be a spreader of, allegedly, a spreader of Russian propaganda on social media. And the Pentagon and the FBI are investigating her now for also spreading much of this information that Teixeira put out there.
Gary, what damage does this do to the U.S.-Israel relationship as these documents leaked show the intense pressure the U.S. has placed on Israel to provide deadly weapons to Ukraine, despite knowing that this will jeopardize its own health and security due to Russia's ongoing involvement in Syria?
Well, we knew that, look, it was public that the administration was trying to get Israel more involved in Ukraine, but Israel has enough problems of its own right now, wouldn't you say? So is it damaging to the U.S.-Israeli relationship? We've already had damage to the relationship. I don't think it can get much worse than it is right now. I mean, Joe Biden he will not invite Benjamin Netanyahu, the elected prime minister, to the United States for a state dinner and for a visit. There are very chilly relations right now. And, the Biden administration still believes in a two-state solution. They're very pro-Palestinian. They're still sending money to the Palestinians. and then the Palestinians turn around and use that to educate their children against Israel. The UN does that as well, and then telling them to be martyrs. Go ahead and kill Jews. I mean, their goal is still to drive Israel and the Jews into the ocean, and they will not let up on that. So I think the relationship is already damaged. This doesn't help it at all.
Gary, I suppose the big question we have to ask, and that's why did it take the US Department of Defense, known as the Pentagon, 5 months to react? And it was only when really the New York Times published this story about the leaking of classified US documents online did this administration act. Now, surely they would have known about this 5 months ago and actually did something about it quickly before this massive intelligence danger that actually endangers the United States and also damages diplomatic relations with America's allies in the world, such as South Korea, Britain, and Israel.
Simon, that would be a question for the Department of Justice here and Merrick Garland, our U.S. Attorney General. Why did it take so long? I mean, this stuff was leaking out 5 months ago. Now, I can't believe an FBI who is monitoring just about every aspect of social media and American lives and our NSA and so forth. We don't have any privacy anymore. That's very clear. Why did it take so long? Maybe they were trying to build a case. Maybe they were trying to follow some leads there and see if there were more than one person involved in this, if it was a ring or a conspiracy, and try to figure all it out. But I have no idea why it took 5 months. You don't think it should take that long. But beyond that, again, I will say, sure, it's damaging to our allies. Much of this information was public anyway, but I would say this. The problem we have here in the United States is the over-classification of information and the number of people who have access to that classified and top-secret information. The more people who have access to it, the greater the chance that things will leak out. This is an excellent example of that. Why did this young IT specialist, an Air Guardsman, National Guardsman, have this kind of information and access to top secret intelligence? I mean, that just blows your mind, doesn't it? It's why did he have this? So we have to re-examine who has access. Why are we overclassifying so much information? I guess some things are basically really not classified, but the systems that they are on make them classified. So we really have to examine that. And we've got presidents, former presidents and vice presidents. Joe Biden, when he was vice president, he had classified documents all over town. He had them at the Penn Biden Center. He had them in Chinatown, an office not far from the White House, also at 2 homes in Delaware. Donald Trump had them at Mar-a-Lago. Hillary Clinton had 33,000 classified emails on a private server in her home. What is going on? Don't we look at this as a serious matter that needs to be addressed? And we really need to get a handle on this. It's dangerous, as you say.
I'm quite agreed. Thank you so much, Gary, for joining us on Behind the Headlines. And viewers, you will want to tune in to more of Gary's very helpful analysis on his show, The Global Lane. Thanks, Gary, for joining the program.
Glad to be here. Thank you for having me. God bless you.
And it's great to have Gary Lane on Behind the Headlines. And just a reminder, you can watch his program, Global Lane, on Revelation TV. You can also watch it on CBN's YouTube page. And he does weekly programs giving updates on very important issues like Behind the Headlines. Regan, I suppose the big question as well is, how does this affect us in this country, and how does this also, for our viewers watching as well, the leaking of these classified documents actually affect Israel as well?
Well, according to the Daily Mail, British lives have been put at risk. The MP is warned after the major U.S. intelligence leak has claimed that the British government has deployed 50 elite troops to Ukraine.
Special forces, yeah.
Exactly. So 50 special forces to Ukraine. Leaked documents, though, were dismissed by the military defense as being inaccurate. And that helpful CBN clip that we saw a few moments ago seems to indicate that there's question over the legitimacy of some of these documents. Did Teixeira edit them? Did he Photoshop them? Was he just are some of them even real? We'll see, and I'm sure the court case will prove that in time. But Tobias Elwood, who chairs the Defense Select Committee, said that the U.S. leaks could endanger lives, despite saying it should come as no surprise that the UK was doing much of the heavy lifting when it comes to elite troops. He told The Times that this deliberate, large-scale disclosure of sensitive material could easily endanger lives and should prompt an urgent review about who has access to sensitive information and how it is shared. A Sky News report says that the leaked document circulating online, seen by Sky News, appears to be from 1st of March 2023 and suggests that at that time the following countries had special forces in the Ukraine. That's USA with 14, the UK having 50, France 15, Latvia 17, and Netherlands 1. And the document does not state where the allegedly deployed forces are located. It doesn't even state what they're doing, what their end goals or objectives are.
Yeah, and also the Pentagon document titled Israel's Pathways to Providing Lethal Aid to the Ukraine predicts that Israel could provide arms to Ukraine under increased US pressure or perceived degradation in its ties with Russia. So Washington's closest Middle East ally has condemned the Russian invasion and provided Ukraine with humanitarian aid, but has rebuffed pleas from Kyiv for military support. Israeli officials say publicly they do not want to sour relations with Moscow over concerns that it could impact their ability to conduct military operations in Syria, where Russia maintains troops and air defense systems. Israel frequently targets Iranian forces and proxies in Syria. Says last year, Michael Herzog, who is Israel's ambassador in the United States, said the following, that Russia could use its military assets in Syria to disrupt Israel's air campaign. US officials said the most plausible scenario for Israel would be to adopt the Turkish model, where it would provide lethal aid to Ukraine through third parties while positioning itself as a mediator in the conflict or dishonest broker. A different scenario could see that Israel step up aid in light of Russia's growing military cooperation with Iran. The leaked documents say that it would require Moscow transferring strategic systems to Iran that could expand its missile or nuclear programs. Another situation could see US leverage forceful position against Iran to win Israeli support, or Russia causing a rupture in its ties by downing Israeli aircraft in Syria. So it's talking about these scenarios, but I mean, in terms of spying on, we know this happens, but to spy on your allies is very damaging diplomatically. The governments may know that, but the public aren't aware of it. Right. Now the public are aware of it. It causes a diplomatic problems, and it creates conflict between allied nations, and it's exactly the situation that we're seeing here now.
Yeah, these leaks could endanger the US, they can endanger the UK, they can endanger Israel, and they can endanger the relationship between these various countries who rely on their respective security services to keep certain conversations and certain discussions and deals being made confidential. Things go on a daily basis, Simon, good things and very bad things that if we were to know about would just have everyone living in a permanent state of concern, worry and fear. And yet, you know, we're grateful that there are certain boundaries that are generally followed that keep a lot of information from being out in the open. What Teixeira on this occasion of his leaking this information, whether it's legitimate or not, does not fully seem to appreciate is the tectonic effect it can have on the relationship between very firm allies. The interaction between the US, the UK and Israel has been fairly stale. I would say, I think my perspective is that the UK relationship with Israel is probably stronger than it has been in previous years. I remember when I first moved here, there seemed to be no favoring of Israel at all. That seems to have shifted a little bit. But certainly in relation to the U.S., Israel is going to be looking and thinking, well, can we trust the US?
Oh, absolutely.
And
but also the other aspect of this one I didn't put in my notes is the fact that the president of South Korea is extremely alarmed because these documents reveal how the US administration put pressure on him to supply lethal weapons to Ukraine, for example. Now, if you're in South Korea's position, what does that do? It puts North Korea firmly into the kind of Russian orbit, firmly into China's orbit, and we see then that South Korea could be attacked because of this if they are then seen to be supporting Ukraine in its war against Russia, and it puts then South Korea right on the front lines, and that is I think the danger of this intelligence leak that's been leaked. It has damaging impact on America's allies and the trustworthy of the United States as an honest broker and also as an ally. If they can't keep this information about states and its allies private behind closed doors where it should be, and just cooperate on information and intelligence gathering between friendly nations in order to push back authoritarian regimes.
Well, and let's suppose there may be more underlying this, and there certainly seems to be. With some of the charges, it could be that there is more underlying it. Could this be something deliberately timed to, in one way, influence or force the hand of Israel, South Korea, and others to be that much more involved and that much more wary of Russia's threat? What I mean by that is, could this be yet another act of causing pressure? Because now they're firmly in the sights of Russia. Of course, both nations will be quite concerned and very annoyed that this leak has been made, and that they've been having conversations, that they've even dared to speak with their allies about potential military aid with deadly technology for Ukraine in its conflict against Russia. Well, now that the news is out there, do they have anything to lose? I guess they have to get involved in some way, is what some might think in those governments. But again, I think we're going to be seeing is a lot more of this story unravel in coming days.
No, and I think also what it shows really is the unraveling of the United States as a world superpower, as a power to be trusted, and it actually helps to speed the political and the military decline of the United States on the world stage. And this is what is dangerous, that who fills that political vacuum, and the likelihood that this will be China in an alliance with Iran, in an alliance with Russia, and the world is in its most dangerous position, I think, since September 1939. And it's very, very precarious. And also, why is it that we're seeing these huge intelligence leaks happen when the Democrats are in power, but when the Republicans in power, and this is not being party political, but it seems there's a repeated happen. This happened in the in the Obama administration. Now it's happening in the Biden administration. You have to ask questions: is this the U.S. military feeling disgruntled about the direction that the Democrats are taking U.S. defense and foreign policy in, or is this a kind of internal leakage to kind of damage America's reputation and to kind of bring America down from within? Because we certainly saw that was the case when Obama was US president. He was more interested in empowering the enemies of the United States than he was in bolstering up America as the world's greatest superpower.
Well, whatever is going to come of this, at the moment, the facts are on the table. We've done our best to present to you this story and its complexity. But Jack Teixeira, 21 years of age, airman with Massachusetts Air National Guard 102nd Intelligence Wing, has been charged under the Espionage Act on charges related to disseminating classified records. He will face a potential 15 years in prison should he be found guilty, and it seems all but certain he will be. It will be interesting to see how he pleads, as he has leaked some of America's most closely guarded secrets, as it has now emerged. He's used his security clearance to follow the investigation as it closed in on him. Jack Teixeira is charged with 2 counts under the Espionage Act. He's appeared already in Boston on this past Friday over the most damaging leak that the U.S. has seen in a decade. The counts cover unauthorized detention and transmission of national defense information and the unauthorized removal and retention of classified material. The counts carry prison sentences of 10 years and then 5 years respectively. And I think this might very well be likely, unless all of this is revealed to be some sort of elaborate plan or some elaborate scheme with multiple parties. Prosecutors could still bring additional charges.
Yes, but I don't think we're going to get any more information once this goes to trial, because they won't want any more kind of leaking of important documents that keeps America safe, but also protects America's allies and also keeps American enemies guessing.
One would think, certainly, and it will be interesting to see also how many of these documents that have been leaked are actually authentic. How many of them are actually, they're in that particular trustworthy state. So anyway, we are about to close. Simon, it's been good to do this program with you.
Likewise, Regan.
And viewers, thank you so much for tuning in for this edition Behind the Headlines. I pray that we've been of some help in communicating a fairly complicated subject to you. May God bless you, may He keep you and keep us. Until next week, it's goodbye. See you then next week Behind the Headlines.